This is the Korg Monopoly, one of the most powerful analog synthesizers that is not modular. Let's begin with the oscillators. There are 4 of them, and there is a lot of control over each individual oscillator. Let's start off with the first oscillator, which I have set to a saw wave. We also can control the octave. Let's add another saw. You have the ability to individually tune each oscillator. Let's add another oscillator. And just for fun, let's add the 4th oscillator. What you see me doing is I'm tuning each oscillator to the first oscillator, which is something you'll want to do on this synthesizer. Another thing to note about this synthesizer is that it takes some time to warm up. It is that analog. When you turn it on, you have to wait for those oscillators to warm up to a specific temperature so that they will stay in tune. Okay, so now we have 4 saw oscillators stacked atop each other. That's a very big sound. The cool thing is we don't have to stick with saw. We could go to all triangles. Or we could go to square waves with pulse width modulation, which is controlled over here. Right now, the pulse width modulation is set to MG2, modulation generator 2, which is the second LFO. You can control the intensity. That is the great sound we're getting before we've even touched the filter. You can also set the pulse width modulation to MG1, which is LFO1. Leaving MG2 for some other function you'll use at some other time. And as if having the ability to set it to one of 2 LFOs isn't cool enough, you can also set it to the VCF EG, which is over here. You can still do what Korg calls a pulse wave, which is actually a square wave. The square wave, or PW as it is listed on here for pulse wave. Let's listen to that one oscillator at a time. And of course, you can control the pulse width. 5 is about 50% duty cycle, which is a square wave. And then as you turn it more towards 1 or more towards 10, it becomes thinner and thinner towards the pulse wave. And then to the point where it doesn't exist. And that gets really big when you've got all 4 oscillators doing it. So you can get a really gigantic sound, and you have all of these combinations you can do with these oscillators. Like we've got 1 on pulse width, 1 on pulse width modulation. We'll put 3 on pulse width, and then 4 on pulse width modulation, which makes a really, really big sound. Or, you can start mixing in saw waves or have 1 of each waves. You're going to want to turn the triangle up because triangles are always quieter. And then you can start messing around with the different octave settings. So in the oscillator section alone, you have such insane possibilities. There is such a great amount of variety that you can generate with the oscillator section alone, because Korg has given you 4 different oscillators, 4 different waves per oscillator, 4 different octave settings per oscillator, the ability to individually tune, which I'll get to next, and the ability to mix the various levels of the different oscillators. It's just astounding. So then you can start messing with the tunings. You can see how fat that actually gets. And once you have the pulse width modulation going crazy and everything slightly detuned, you see just how big a sound you can get out of the synthesizer. I'm setting all the oscillators back to the point where they're all in tune with each other. Okay, all 4 oscillators are currently pretty much in tune with each other. Korg is so nice to you because if you were playing, you want to be able to get that detuned oscillator sound immediately. And they've given you the ability to do that by providing you with a detune knob, which slightly detunes each oscillator from each other. That way, you always can detune those oscillators with the turn of a single knob, which is so convenient. And then bring them back to the tune they were at. Korg has given you many different key assign modes. For example, I have had it set on unison. That basically sets all of the oscillators in unison, and it makes the synthesizer a monophonic synthesizer. However, they've also given us, I'm going to skip to the poly section. Now, the computer inside the keyboard, the tracking computer, will take each oscillator and apply it to each note that is played, one for each of the oscillators. The monophonic monopoly suddenly becomes the polyphonic monopoly. And because each of these oscillators has the functionality that it does as far as tuning and pulse width modulation, you can get a very fat sound without needing multiple oscillators layered atop one another. And you've got 4 notes of polyphony, and any chord you want to define within reason can easily be done with 4 notes. Korg was thinking, well, maybe you do want both polyphony and layered notes. So they give you the unison share setting, which, as long as you play only 2 notes at a time, if you play duophonically, you've got 2 oscillators per note. Right now, 2 oscillators are playing D, and 2 oscillators are playing F sharp. So there, those of you who are complaining about not having layered oscillators, Korg has allowed you to do so. Or, let's say you're extremely lazy and you don't want to play all these chords. You'd rather one note it. For some reason, Korg has allowed you to do this. You go into polyphony mode, you play a chord, like a simple major chord. Now, while you're playing your other synthesizer, you can be playing one note chords over here. Go back to poly mode and let's play a minor chord. Okay, that's great, but now everything is minor and you don't want to have to bounce back and forth. The Monopoly creators were thinking so far ahead with all of these things. They really wanted to give you the best possible analog synthesizer, and they did. Here's how. Okay, let's go over here to the modulation section for a second. They have given you the ability to control VCO1 with the bend wheel. So let's do something funny. Okay. Let's listen only to VCO 1. And I have it set so that I can make VCO 1 drop down a half step.